Hi, Pat.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Are you first timer here?
Yes,
Awesome. Welcome, welcome.
thank you, thank you. I was trying to catch up with you and then I had to cancel, then you canceled, so now I'm here.
Ah, awesome. It works out.
Am I okay? Am I on the right link and all that?
Yes, you are. Yes, you
All
are.
right.
Usually we'll have anywhere from 5 to 20 people. I
Okay.
think lately we've had a bigger turnout, which is fun, but also I want to make sure that people feel comfortable sort of sharing and making it more interactive. So
Yeah, sure. It's a great
hi, Lam.
idea.
So
Hi.
Lam, is it your first time here?
It is, yes.
Awesome. Pat, Lam, are you
Mine
guys
too.
are you both from coming from the NSA?
Yes.
Awesome.
I am, yeah.
Well, welcome. We'll let folks trickle in here before we get started. Hi, Ahmad. Oh, I think I lost you. Hi, Ahmad. Oh, you're on mute.
Hey Eric, how are you guys? Sorry.
Good. We're just letting some folks trickle in here. Are you a first timer here?
I'm a first timer.
Awesome. It's always great to see some new faces. So I'll give you, well, let's give folks a minute. That way we're not repeating myself. But definitely try to make this interactive. So, happy to answer any questions that you guys might have, particularly as it relates to recruiting and, how it might help you navigate your career and your job search. So,
Sure.
where are you guys coming in from, by the way?
I'm in Texas.
Texas, okay.
LA.
Los Angeles.
The Silicon Valley, South Bay,
Oh,
San
right
Francisco,
on.
San Jose area.
Yeah. I live in Utah now, but I grew up in Southern California, Los Angeles,
Nice.
and used to live in the Bay Area a little. I spent 6 years up in the Bay Area in San Francisco back in the days.
Just a tiny bit different, huh? You living in Utah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I live near a ski resort, so I'm like 15 minutes from a ski resort. Um,
Oh, that must have been fun.
yeah, it's amazing. What's that?
Was that why you moved there?
Well, I was recruited for a mobile product management job back almost 10 years, 11 years ago. I lose track, 2012. Um, and so that's what brought me out here. But that's what brought me out here, but just the lifestyle and you know, yeah, just the lifestyle sort of kept us here. So
Honestly, I'm rethinking my decisions in life. Living in here for almost more than a decade here in
I
the Bay
mean,
Area.
the
Just
Bay Area was fun. I lived in San Francisco for 3 years, and it's an amazing place. But I have a family, so it's hard to raise a family in the city as expensive as San Francisco.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
very expensive in California. My sister lives out there for years and years, and to see how when she first went out, and now the cost of living out there now is crazy,
Yeah.
just crazy. I don't know
Oh,
how you
yeah,
guys
it's
who live there
ridiculous.
do.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get started? Hello, Hervé and Christopher.
Hello, hello. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Cosette. It's always nice to see new faces as well as familiar faces. But let's just get started here. So, for those of you who haven't been with us here, I do this on a weekly basis every Thursday, 30 minutes, give or take. I've been recruiting now for the past 10 years. And in a prior life, I was in software product development and product management. So I have a bit of a technical background, but somehow I ended up becoming a recruiter. And I moderated 2 JSCs over the past 9 months, and I think everybody's moved on by now. But what I found in sort of that moderation experience was that there's a lot of sort of misconceptions, a lot of black box stuff as far as job seekers are concerned when they look at the recruiting process, the recruiting mindset, hiring manager mindset. And I know that a lot of you are probably a little bit further along in your career. So you yourselves have probably been hiring managers yourselves. But I've been doing this now for, again, about 10 years. And so the premise here is that if I can shed a little bit of light on this black box that is recruiting, that is interview process and all of that, I'm hoping that it can help you navigate your job search much more effectively and at least temper your expectations. in the common scenarios where you're not getting a response back from a recruiter. So, um, so that's that. The way we structure this is largely unstructured. Just shout out a question. If it gets crazy, I do have a question board that I'll drop in here. Or if you don't feel comfortable sort of blurting out a question, you can go into this question board, and the code is 9613879. And just, you can upvote questions that people have posted. I try to groom this, but there might be some questions that are remaining from last week. But anyway, that said, I think that's my spiel. So anyway, I try to make this interactive. So if anyone else has perspective, I welcome that. That way, we could just maximize sort of learning within the context of job searching and recruiting. All right.
Right.
So let's see. If anybody has any questions, drop them in the question board, or you can drop it into the chat box here in Zoom, or you could just go old school and express it verbally. Okay, let's see. Do you read each application? I'm just reading off the question board here. Do you read each application as it comes in, or do many get ignored? It's a strange time right now. There's abundance of great talent, so job postings, particularly in tech, are getting a disproportionate amount of inbound. So you can be competing with as many as 50, 100, several hundred even applications alongside yours. So recruiters are also finding it. Recruiters are also taking on more work as as many internal recruiting company teams are getting slimmed down. So the point is that it's tough right now for a recruiter to give every application, a thorough look. So the point is that you have to make your application, your resume stand out. It has to be focused and distinct, and you have to prime it with sort of the backdoor, side door, trying to connect with ideally the person that's going to be reviewing resumes, and hopefully they are primed in the sense that maybe they're looking out for your name, or you come in with maybe an internal referral or some internal champion that's going to say, hey, you need to look at so and so, right? So yeah, a lot of them do get ignored because yeah, recruiters are looking for ways that they can fast track, and so they'll look for referrals, any recommendations, or people that try to go around the front door, right? And so I think that's just it's pretty common nowadays. Let's see. I've made a few good connections with recruiters, but they're always looking for a specific role. Is this just a numbers game of getting on lots and lots of recruiters' radars? So yeah, recruiters tend to be a bit more specific. And if you think about sort of the incentive structure for recruiters, external recruiters being recruiters that work for an agency and that are working for any number of clients, there's a bit of an incentive structure for them to make a placement quickly, for better or for worse. And so they tend to be, hyper concerned about the roles that they're assigned to, right? Because oftentimes they're compensated based on their ability to close a role or fill a role. And so, so yeah, that's sort of their incentive structure. The incentives for internal recruiters are, well, I mean, they want to fill the role as well, but maybe they're not as aggressive, at least in my experience, about filling a particular role, whereas external recruiters tend to be a little bit more aggressive about filling their role, for better or for worse. Sometimes that translates into, a bit of a transactional, short-term sort of mindset. In some ways, sometimes they tend to be higher touch, and maybe they tend to be more creative about finding the right fit. So it really depends. But it's important to kind of understand sort of the incentive structures for the different kinds of recruiters. And even within external versus internal, like external recruiters, you'll have a whole sort of spectrum. Like some of them are obviously more senior, and will likely to have more, they'll likely have more line of sight to the hiring manager, which is super important, right? All things being equal, you'd rather be working with a senior recruiter that has line of sight to the hiring manager, the hiring authority that can make decisions and really knows what, what they're looking for in the role. But going back to the question here, yeah, I mean, as far as recruiters, I would try to connect with recruiters that, ideally specialize in sort of the kinds of roles that you might be looking for. A lot of recruiters tend to be regionally focused as well. So if you're living in Seattle and you are looking for a job in Seattle, I would be less inclined to work with a recruiter in Florida, right? Which is probably obvious. Let's see. I see a question here in the the chat box. Is there a certain point of time, for example, after 2 weeks, when applications would likely be a long shot? Oh, 2 weeks after, for example, the position is posted? Was that the question, Tim? Okay, I'll assume that yeah, I mean, depending on the position, right? So what I found is that some larger companies tend to have evergreen sort of job postings because they're so large and there's always some attrition or churn, and they're always looking to backfill. So some postings or positions might be more evergreen. For a smaller company where that's unlikely, I could see job postings getting stale, because what happens is when a recruiter posts a job, they'll be more inclined to wait a few days and let the pipeline sort of build up, and then they'll go through a phase, or they'll go through a step where they'll evaluate the pipeline or the inbound, and they'll start forming cohorts from that inbound, and they'll start shuffling that cohort through the process, and they might not revisit the applicants or the top of the funnel. Well, if somebody gets hired from that initial cohort, then everyone's happy and they probably won't go back to look at the remaining applicants. So I would say, in my experience, that time is of the essence. And so if you apply sooner to a job posting, that you're more likely to get looked at than if it's stale 2 weeks out. Because for a recruiter to go back to the top of the funnel and reevaluate the pipeline, that initial cohort, it would have not have to had work out, right? They didn't find anybody in that initial cohort. So
Makes sense.
hopefully that makes sense. Let's see, Christopher, I was told by a career coach that using external recruiters can put the candidate at a disadvantage due to that. Oh, that's a good question. So typically there's separate budgets, in my experience, there's separate budgets for compensation and for recruiting fees. And so they're not sort of pooled. One is not taking away from the other, typically. That's what I've seen. All things being equal, I have seen situations where you might have an external recruiter sort of building pipeline for a particular role, and you might even have an internal recruiter that's also building or managing pipeline for that same role. And so I've seen it in some situations where an internal candidate, an internally procured candidate was preferred over the other candidate, either because the internal recruiter maybe had a little bit more leverage or line of sight to the hiring manager, and they could champion their candidate, I guess, more vigorously, right? And that typically happens at the top of the funnel. I'm trying to think. I've never seen it, and not to say that this has never happened, but I've never seen it where a hiring manager, towards the bottom of the funnel, has looked at two candidates and said, "Wow, either of these folks could be, a good hire. I'm going to make my decision based on whether we're going to have to pay an external recruiting firm for this candidate." I've never seen that happen.
Okay.
Again, because usually the budgets are separate, and the hiring manager's, incentive structure is to find the best person. And
Right.
usually that budget is not coming out of their budget. What's coming out of their budget is the compensation for that headcount, not the recruiting fee.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's kind of what I've seen. And just let me think about your question a little bit more because if you had a chance to work with either an external recruiter or an internal recruiter for the same role for the same company, what if there would be an advantage to working with one or the other? I'll tell you this: if you've applied to a company, and then you're also getting, so the thing with external recruiters is they can't double submit you to a client.
Right.
So if a client already has either your application or you're already in conversation with one of the recruiters or the hiring manager, a third party external recruiting firm cannot sort of submit you again or submit you as well, right? There's just no incentive because they already the company already has claim on you, and the third party recruiting firm they can't get compensated for submitting you, so they won't, right? And that's just typical. That's just typical. I'm sure there's other contracts out there where it might be written a different way, but usually that's typical. So I hope that helps, Christopher.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's see. I think I answered this question last time. Let's see. How do recruiters manage salary? Question with clients, employers. Yeah, recruiters getting a commission. Yet is that factored in? Yeah, I think I touched on this already. Again, budgets are typically separate, and external recruiters typically get paid on a commission. So yeah, they're very incentivized to close the deal, again, for better or for worse, right? Let's see, what are your thoughts on the career break option on LinkedIn? I'm going on half a year now. So I'll give you my perspective as a recruiter. I think it's just par for the course right now. There's a lot of folks out there. There's an abundance of great talent, and folks are struggling to just sort of find that seamless transition from one job to the next. So career breaks are quite common. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. I think that as a recruiter, what I would be interested in is how you're spending your time, right? Obviously, I mean, not obviously, but a lot of folks find that doing a job search is a full-time job. But if there's ways that you can get involved with side projects that sort of ideally further enhance your skills, that would be something that would be stand out for me. As a recruiter looking at somebody's career break or their LinkedIn profile. So I hope that helps. I think is your question, actually putting in a separate section into the career.
Yeah. So like
into
on
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, I see some people have it listed as like an actual career break, and anyone who wants to put the pieces together could see the new certifications I have, could look at my volunteer work and see some of the projects there and see I've been busy, but I still have it as just my most recent job back in January is my most recent job. Is adding career break an actual useful thing to do, or just
Yeah, I guess I can't speak for all recruiters or all hiring managers, but I can speak for how I would interpret it or how I would perceive it. I wouldn't necessarily hold it against you. I think if it was just career break with, and it sounds like you have like projects and things sort of things that you're working on that are quote unquote productive. That would be my big question, right? Is what are you doing with the time? And not to say that it has to be all professional, right? Like maybe you're just taking a career break to travel the world with your family. I don't know, right? So I wouldn't discount that as a recruiter. Again, this is just me, right? I wouldn't discount that as a recruiter. because it signals several things, right? It signals that you are able to be honest with yourself and with me about how you're spending your time, and that you're kind of a holistic person, right? It's not. That's what I like to see as a recruiter. I like to see a resume and a LinkedIn profile that tells me that the person is human, right? Uh, Career accomplishments and all that, that's par for the course. That's great. And that's sort of table stakes. But what I like to see is that this person has other interests. There's other facets of the person that, when you bring diverse experience, diverse perspectives, at least in my experience, it can complement a team really well. And there's a lot of things. Those are some of the things that clients I've worked with have expressed to me that they look for as well. So look at it as an opportunity to kind of maybe round out your expression of who you are on your LinkedIn profile or your resume. But yeah, that's how I would interpret it if I saw that. I wouldn't say that that's a good thing or it's a bad thing. It's kind of what do you put underneath it, right? If you put that as a separate section.
As a follow-up to that point, what about volunteering at your kid's school how is that perceived?
Volunteering at your kid's school, I think it depends on what you're doing there, right? Like, are you championing a new initiative around integrating technology to help kids learn about generative AI? That sounds really cool. But if you're just picking up trash, I wouldn't think as highly of that as I would the former, right? So I guess it
Yeah,
depends on
well,
kind of, how you're contributing, what value you're adding, and
what
you know,
about in terms of volunteering in the classroom itself, in terms of working with kids? We're talking about elementary school kids, so
yeah,
not
yeah.
generative AI, but helping them with their reading, math, and writing lessons and stuff.
It really depends on the recruiter. And again, I can't speak for all recruiters, but I can speak for myself. When I see a human element, it especially nowadays, right? When everything's written by AI, it helps me. It makes it more engaging for me as a recruiter, right? And it helps stand out, right? Oh, this person is volunteering at the school. That's interesting. Maybe they have a heart, right? Like, for me, it helps. The other thing too is what I would suggest is, your resume, your LinkedIn profile needs to have a theme, right? So, many of you here are coming from the NSA, and there's this concept of the candidate market fit, right? And so anything you put on your resume should in some way further and align, at minimum, should align with your candidate market fit statement, right? And so I don't know, I'm just making this up, but like if you're a corporate trainer, right? There must be some ways that you could spin or highlight the work that you're doing volunteering at your kid's school, as far as training, whether it's putting together a curriculum or I don't know, right? But like everything you add should further that in some way, right? So I hope that helps them.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's see. Oh yeah, there's some comments here in the chat. Let's see. Should you list other non-professional interests on your resume? Again, I like to see this because it sort of rounds it out, but maybe it's sort of sort of challenging my previous statement. Everything should further and sort of corroborate your candidate market fit statement. But when you're talking about non-professional interests, it helps round out who you are as a person, and it makes it sticky for me. It's like I look through resumes all the time, and if I see something unique and interesting, it helps me remember that person. Oh, that's the person that swam the English Channel. I don't know, right? Like, and so that might not have anything to do with, your particular skills for the position you're applying for, but it does round it out and also suggests to me, oh, maybe, there might be this halo effect, right? It's like maybe that person is pretty, I don't know, mentally tough or something, right? And we really need that in this sales role. I don't know, right? So so yeah, I would suggest if there's ways, especially if you're proud of it, right? If it's something that you're proud of, um, I would suggest a little section where you can put that. And usually it's, folks put that towards the end of their resume where it's like extracurricular or volunteer work or personal, right? So uh let's see. So it sounds like, how can I emotionally stir the recruiter? Jenna, you want to expand on that question?
I think all the things you're saying is like, how can you how can you forge a more emotional connection with the recruiter by your
Yeah.
non-professional things? Like, that's what you're getting at. It's just like, how can you come off as more human
I
and
think
more
so.
unique? Because like people were whimsical, so like we'll probably attach to something so cool as like swimming the English Channel. So I guess it's like a good hack
Yeah.
if you feel like you need it. Like I'm weird in that my skills are like, I guess, in high demand, that I don't have to like do that as much. But I also do have a killer LinkedIn header profile, so maybe that helps.
Yeah, I remember. So yeah, check out Jenna's LinkedIn profile. Yeah, I mean, especially again, I'll say this again, like, people want to connect with a human, right? And to the extent that you can channel that through a paper document or a digital document, I think you will stand out apart from others. And so, yeah. Looking at the question boards here in the chat.
This whole thing about ATS and, if your resume doesn't get through ATS, it gets thrown in the bin.
There's some truth to that. At the same time, I think some of the other dynamics that I mentioned in terms of applying in a timely manner and sort of coupling that with sort of the side door, back door, trying to get out in front of that recruiter that might be looking at your resume. I mean, there's something to be said about, keyword optimizing. And ATS systems, at least as far as I've seen, not to say, and it's a moving target now in terms of how these ATS systems and software companies are integrating AI into their ATS workflows. But for the most part, as a recruiter, when you're going into an ATS system, and so right now, a lot of folks are, there's a lot of inbound, right? But and recruiters are looking at that inbound and trying to find the folks that would be strongest. And when they do that, they're typically either typing in keywords, or they're just kind of they're looking at the resumes and the applications. When there is, in times when there's not much, where there's more job opportunities than there are qualified talent, what ends up happening is the recruiter has to go outbound, right? And so they'll look at any inbound, they'll look at their database for past candidates, and they'll do keyword searches on that within their ATS system. So the long story short, I mean, you want to make sure that your resume does have the keywords. And there's an exercise you can do, especially with like ChatGPT, is you can sort of copy and paste the job description and even elements of the sort of the company website that you're interested in, copy and paste that into ChatGPT and ask it to, sort of point out keywords that you might want to integrate into your resume. You can also, copy and paste your resume or upload your resume as well into ChatGPT and do that same exercise. And so it'll, it's pretty easy to do that now. Like there's a lot of ways you can do that using ChatGPT to kind of, help you integrate some of those keywords in. But again, I wouldn't be too, your your the reason your application, your resume is not getting looked at or is getting disqualified, that's probably lower on the list in my opinion and based on what I've seen. So
Thank you.
sure. Let's see. Let's see. Is it better to work with specific recruiters who would lead generate and vouch for you? I don't mind paying for that type of service. Not sure if they're even effective, efficient, or add value. That's interesting. I haven't seen too many folks. I guess who asked this question? Is the person here?
It's me.
Oh my, yeah. So, I mean, have you seen many recruiters that are sort of advertising this service? I'm just
I
curious.
don't know many, but I had been approached by a few,
Mm.
and it's tempting because it's otherwise I feel like either I have to do those search and lead generate myself as opposed to focusing on, as you said, your own side projects or doing preparations and whatnot. Otherwise, you're just looking, it's an additional, I guess, part of the full-time job searching process. Um, and then you don't know because you don't have any formula. You just, it really depends on subjective, your own, how you lead generate. But if the ones who approached me, they seem to have like connections, well connected, and they have tapped into those pool. So at least they cut a lot of fat, trimmed a lot of fat that I would have had to go through, and so. But I don't know what they're asking. They might be asking for money, parts of my paycheck. I don't really know. I'm not talking about recruiting agency, like, forever, but like just to get that service, to get the foot in the door, and then hand me off, and then I'll take care of my interviews myself. But just
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that is even efficient, effective, or is it because someone else is vouching for me and the internal recruiters or the hiring managers not looking at me directly and not reaching out to me? I'm at a disadvantage in the beginning. Like I don't know what's right and what would be the better approach.
Yeah, I've seen some of this model for higher level roles, right? Where you have sort of Jerry Maguire out there advocating for you as as an executive, right? I mean, I'd be curious, and maybe you could shoot this to me offline. I'd be curious, like what some of these services look like, if they're really lead gen folks that are masquerading as recruiters. I don't know. But I'd be curious to see what, how their model works. Um, but yeah, I mean, it raises a good point, right? Like, as a job seeker, it can be a full-time job, and if there's ways that you can automate, there are ways you can automate sort of your outreach and sort of managing that. I think Teal is sort of like a CRM for job seekers, help you manage your contact list, your sort of it's sort of the job seeker side of the ATS, right? It's maybe application tracking system, right? I think it's teal.com.
Yeah,
But that's
it
something
is.
that you can look at that can help you be more efficient about managing your time. I mean, this whole job search exercise, right? It's sort of a balancing act of where do you focus your time, and how do you manage sort of the ups and downs of sort of that emotional roller coaster, right? And how do you get some sort of validation about what you're doing is sort of effective, right? And so closing those feedback loops. And sometimes that's out of your control. But I think if most of you are in the Never Search Alone community, I think it's a great community to kind of realize some of those benefits. But Jaime,
Yeah.
did you have a question? I think I saw a hand come up. No? Okay. All right. Well, unless there's any other burning questions, I'm here every week. I do this every week, and love to kind of see how you guys are doing, and if there's any way I can help, beyond this, let me know. Um, any other remaining questions for now?
Hey Eric, maybe a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
For those postings that seem to be reposted every week or two, are those like an evergreen thing, or is it kind of like, I guess it's also possible they just haven't found the right person?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, there could be any number of reasons why job postings are sort of, you see them cycling and getting reposted.
Mhm.
Probably the biggest one I've seen is that they just haven't found the right person, and they think that by reposting it or taking it down and then have somebody somehow reposting it again will make the job posting less stale, and maybe it'll get on other candidates' radar that it didn't previously. That's probably the biggest reason that I've seen.
Yeah.
Um, otherwise, again, I've seen people or employers just keep postings up as sort of evergreen. In some cases, I've seen job postings come up and they're just testing the market. They don't really know what they're looking for. Not to say that they're not hiring for the role, but they don't necessarily know what they're looking for. And I've seen the same job description or job position sort of evolve, often with respect to seniority. They might think, oh, I need a junior person or mid-level person. They start interviewing those folks. And, oh, man, actually, we need somebody more senior. They go fight for more budget. They change the job description, and they go for somebody more senior, right? So I've seen job descriptions or positions sort of evolve in that way, and that's pretty typical in terms of seniority along that dimension. So
makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. I love seeing your guys' faces, and tell a friend. I'm happy to help. And anyway, have a great week.
Thank you.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.